Today is Wednesday, October 26th, 2011. I'm Matthew T.G.
I'm Steve Stanley.
I'm Heath Mulliken.
I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Technology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. The world's only user-antagonistic podcast. This is episode 129.
Woohoo!
All right, so we're all in studio. Were we all in studio last week?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So
This is the show that was not supposed to happen. We should have been conducting this from the golden balustrades of heaven.
listen, I mean, you're getting ahead of our last story
Yeah.
here,
I'm
Steve.
just-
What
I'm
are
just
you doing?
giving folk
You're
a
ruining
hint.
the show.
Raising
Listen,
the anticipation.
I'm walking out.
Listen, I am just happy for two things. Number one, I'm happy Tony is still with us after his Wisconsin Badgers lost last week, and I'm also
still
happy.
recovering.
I'm also happy that the people that were on your lawn last week as part of Occupy Technology are gone.
Hey, we were in Columbia this past weekend, and there at the courthouse, there were a group of people.
Oh, really?
Some tent set up, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's cool, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Sounds kind of random to me. All right. Hey, today we want to welcome Kent Shaffer to the show. Kent holistically oversees OpenChurch and guides its vision. He's a ministry organizational strategist who has spent the past few years working on tech startups and consulting for groups such as LifeChurch.tv, Saddleback Church, and the Catalyst Conference. He blogs about ministry at churchrelevance.com. While known most for his thoughts on design, marketing, and technology, Kent's ministry roots began as a missionary's kid in Peru and evolved into 10-plus years of youth and children's ministry at Church on the Move and LifeChurch.tv. Kent, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're excited about having you. Let's start out by talking about OpenChurch. Really, two questions for our listeners and viewers. What is OpenChurch? And then once you've explained that, kind of give us the why, the vision, the mission, and what you want to accomplish through this.
Right. Well, whenever I was working with different groups and we'd be working on global collaboration projects, just something that would help unite the global church. A number of questions that we always would wrestle with is how can we really go further than what's been done before. Obviously there's been a lot of baggage in terms of people hitting barriers from dogmatic differences. There's political or red tape differences. And as I was working on projects like this, I also started to see just the importance to have an independent entity, some organization that's not affiliated with anything else, that doesn't have an agenda other than just to collaborate and to resource or to whatever the ultimate goal is for that organization. That's what it exists for. That way you don't have the challenge of, well, this is such and such initiative by megachurch, or this is such and such initiative by celebrity pastor. And those are things that, while might not seem like it's a big deal, you have cases where, like John Piper from Desiring God inviting Rick Warren to speak, and there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of issues that many John Piper fans had with Rick Warren coming to speak at one of their events. And so just trying to think through, what are some other things that can be done other than just an independent entity that could extend collaboration that much further. And so started thinking through, what are barriers and parameters that can be placed on leadership to prevent egos from creeping in, to keep any type of the downfalls that come with money. So whether that has to do with greed or strings attached, or even with the case of advertisements. We won't have any advertisements just because of the nature of having an ad on a site instantly starts to give partiality to that advertiser. And it becomes something where the person who has money to buy that ad gets preferred placement over anyone else on the site. So as we started thinking through what it could be, these were things that I wanted to do through another organization. Myself, I didn't want to be the one that was pushing for that. And I knew it wouldn't be exactly like I envisioned if it had gone through another group. But at the same time, it just didn't seem like it was possible. There are groups that I'd work with, and maybe their corporate culture wasn't the right fit. Maybe everything else they had going on, it would be such a long distance back burner project that I wasn't sure if it would ever actually be pursued. And then last September, I was sitting on a porch of a business partner, and I felt just very clear direction. I'd been involved with some tech startups for a season, and I felt clear direction from God that I need to go ahead and start doing OpenChurch now. I need to do it before like the tech startups have money coming in and all that stuff. And also got affirmation that I need to do it before, not only is it the right timing, but I need to do it before I have the money, because otherwise people would say, oh, well, look what Kent did with his money on the side. And this would be something where if I don't have the money, people would look and say, wow, look what God did. And so
very good.
With that, I'd been working on tech startups, doing a number of other things, occasional client work, and also volunteering a lot with Life Church primarily. And so spent some time last fall just getting Life Church's blessing to transition out to be able to do something like OpenChurch, since Life Church has some similar initiatives with their Life Church open resources. Spent some time transitioning out of the startups I was in, and really last February is when we officially made it a nonprofit recognized by the state of Oklahoma, and just started laying down the groundwork. And it's been remarkable each month to see how God keeps building on the vision. So we have a big core value of impartiality, which has really changed everything that we've done. So most of the best practices, or whether it's marketing or web design, user interface, or even how to fund an organization, they're usually highly based on partiality. And we want to be sure that because of what we're doing, we don't want any action to be partial and start to push some other culture away.
Right.
So it's processing through things like, how do we create a user interface that's impartial but still highlights valuable content? And we've processed through that. How do we set up the database to be able to support that? How do we fund the organization? And in some ways, I'd say that we are partial. We do have high benchmarks of quality acceptance. So in some ways, you could even say we're like Apple computers in that format. So there's going to be a benchmark where there needs to be certain type of quality. It needs to meet certain theological parameters. So for us, we want, by and large, most articles to be in direct alignment with the gospel, the Great Commission, and the 2 love commandments.
Wow.
Good.
We want it to avoid any bipartisan politics, any self-promotion, and any slander. So if it can meet all of those, and probably the first and foremost one is just having that quality benchmark. If it can meet that, then among all the contributors, whether it's ideas or resources, it's going to be an equal platform where someone like Billy Graham's treated the exact same way as a village pastor in Malawi. And I guess before I get into that, I should have actually specified for viewers who aren't familiar with what OpenChurch is. It's a platform that enables Christians globally to equip each other with ideas in the form of articles and resources in the form of pretty much anything that you can imagine. Starting out, it will definitely be web-based, but long-term vision, we see the need to be partnering strategically with groups to help with scripture advancement, both online and offline. For some groups, like let's say rural India, for church planners, they might actually need resources in print,
Sure.
or they might need resources that are just purely visual or audio. Maybe they do need digital. We're looking at every single direction that we could possibly go in order to be able to resource every single people group around the world. That might take years or decades. But
Ken, let me ask you this. I mean, it was clear to me that this is going to be a website where resources are made available, but it seems to me also, I'm kind of getting the understanding that collaboration is part of this, yes, no?
It is, and one of the challenges we find is how to sum up what all we're trying to do, because there's kind of that initial, let's give away resources, let's talk ideas.
Yeah.
But there's so much more that we're brainstorming about that could be accomplished. And it's also just to even distinguish how it's different from already existing platforms out there or ideas that people have talked about for years already. So on the collaboration side, ultimately something that we're looking to do is, for many groups, they might just be getting free resources or ideas at first, but we want to be able to come alongside them and empower them to start creating resources for their culture, by their culture.
Sure.
So, like, for instance, like with Life Church, whenever we'd work on the Life Church Open Resource Project, we'd get incredible gratitude coming out of groups like France and Peru, children's ministers that love having the curriculum. And, that's phenomenal, but it's curriculum that's created for Life Church by Life Church. So you have a certain cultural perspective as well as theological perspective. And it's great, but with everything that you do, even the best ministry initiatives come with collateral damage. And so we want to try to reduce the collateral damage that occurs. So if you have one resource, there's always the pitfall that people can start to use it as a crutch. Either maybe they aren't going to try to start teaching on their own, or they might even start to look at it as a theological or cultural crutch. And if you start to give away a broad scope of resources, so you have like Wesleyan Holiness, Reformed, Emergent, Anglican, Organic Church, all of those type of theological perspectives, you're offering, let's say, children's ministry curriculum. Then you have someone around the world that looks at it and says, wait a second, these are all different. This is man's interpretation of God's word, not God's word directly, which sometimes they can fall prey to thinking if there's just one resource. And so with seeing the diversity, they start to realize they need to study the curriculum, figure out what they personally believe, and also what's right for their group that they're ministering to.
So as part of this, trying to empower, get resources in the hands of people in certain cultures to empower them for incarnational ministry as they exegete their own culture. I mean, that's part of what you're aiming for.
Yeah, ultimately that's a big part. So on the very base level, we want to just reduce inefficiency. So, like, for instance, let's say that there's a sermon series graphic which has become pretty popular to use in the United States. Average cost of one of those, let's say a church spends $300. If you get 10,000 users to download that sermon series graphic, you just saved the global church $3 million, which could be used for orphans, widows, creating more resources.
Okay.
So there's an efficiency concept there. There's also having access to better resources. It dramatically changes up the marketplace. Sure. And the competition element that comes there, not in a bad sense of competition, but just from a marketplace terminology standpoint, it's going to cause people to start to see different high-quality resources that are available. And if you're going to create something, it raises the benchmark.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's like breaking the 4-minute mile. Once people see that that's what they have to shoot for, it's amazing what can be done. And so ultimately the big goal is what you're talking about. We want to be able to come alongside and not strip from a people group what their cultural strengths are. We want to come alongside and, as much as possible, equip them with resources and ideas, but hopefully they can take those, get inspiration from it, get even more inspiration from God's word, and then create resources and tools that can actually be used within their own culture, because that's where it's going to be dramatically more impactful for each and every ministry that uses it.
Wow. You know, it's interesting. I'm going to kind of jump down, Kent, something I was going to talk to you a little later in our interview, but you know, one of the things that I've observed is that you see larger ministries which are beginning to reach out to smaller ministries, and the example, you know, that I sent you just for our topic of discussion here is you see like the YouVersion Bible app. I mean, it's this great free app, and my question to you is, why do you think you know, that we're beginning to see this shift from paid for resources to free resources. And I think when I ask that question, I mean, obviously I want to answer to it, but I do think that in my own mind there's been this evolution that perhaps the church has this thing wrong in that if the gospel and building the kingdom is what we're trying to do, then perhaps we have a lot of our Christian resources we've built on the wrong model of kind of an enterprise, a money-making enterprise. And I know that people don't have time to work free all the time, and so I guess what's leading to this emphasis to free resources, and what's the balance in terms of paid for and people's time and stuff like that?
Right. Good questions. I will say, but before I get into explaining how I think that churches have gotten there, what I think is really exciting is it's no longer just the big mega organizations that are able to give away things for free.
Okay.
But some of the best graphic design that I see coming out of churches are actually from church plants. Because you might have a planter that's a graphic designer. Maybe their core team has a quality graphic designer. And so we've talked to groups already who I talked to one group once when they were 1 month old as a church plant. They have some of the best design that I've seen out there. And to talk to them as far as, hey, are you interested in giving away free resources? You could impact the whole global church. It almost blew their minds because they're used to almost the top-down concept of you have to work 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years as a church before you can have influence.
Yeah.
But here in your first week, your first month, your first year, your first decade, it doesn't matter where you're at. If you have quality and value, then it starts to become something where you can impact any church, whether big or small.
Great point.
And what I think helped start a lot of it is in the 80s and 90s, as you started to have more and more churches reach megachurch status. I like to call that season Generation 1 of megachurches. And as they were growing through these seldom before reached congregation sizes, they started to ask questions like, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to scale? How are we going to do this right? I've heard before, some churches talk about you hit a ceiling at 12,000, you hit a ceiling at 13,000, 14,000, 15,000. Every single increment as far as congregation size that you increase often requires a different approach or system from a Western theology standpoint in order to scale it. And so what they ended up doing is they started looking to things like, well, what are the big corporations doing? What does Coca-Cola do? What does the military do to organize? And they got a lot of great management systems and ideas from those organizations. But with it comes some very risky potential collateral damage that can happen. One thing that I've seen happen often is sometimes the systems can become more important than people.
Wow.
So these systems let them do things significantly better. But as Paul details out in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, we all have our jobs, we have our roles. You need to do your job to the best of your ability. But then he segues into 1 Corinthians 13 and says, but it doesn't matter how good you do your job, if you don't have love, it's all worthless. And unfortunately, a decade, 2 decades into being a megachurch, a number of them started to find, oh, wait a second, we lost our love for people because we're caring more about systematic excellence instead.
Yeah.
You also see issues where because you're looking to businesses, you start to take on more of a business capitalistic mindset. And so it's easy to justify things like, okay, well, 80s, 90s, you have your VHS and cassette clubs going on. You have to charge money for that. Or you'd be, I guess you don't have to, but it makes a lot of sense just because of how much cost for duplications involved. So let's say you charge $5 for a cassette. You merge to CDs down the road, you charge $5 for a CD. And then with technology advancing, you have MP3s, and they're at a point where making lots of money as a megachurch, and this is generalization. It's
Sure.
not true for all
I
of them.
understand.
It's just kind of a historic stereotype. Making lots of money became more easy and condoned and acceptable. And so all of a sudden, whenever you have MP3 technology, rather than thinking, oh, wow, here's a way that we can get our sermons out to the masses, we can make even more profit on each sermon. And it was almost something that they didn't even start to think about.
Yeah.
But as you start to have Generation 2 megachurches coming up, they're starting to process through things like, well, wait a second, if we spend all of our budget to try to get people to come here on the weekend to hear the gospel, and if I spend all of my hours, 20 to 40 hours a week writing a sermon just for people to hear once, but then I'm going to put a $5, $3, $6 barrier on people hearing it after that first weekend, it just doesn't make sense. Plus, is it even mine to look at as intellectual property, or is it the Holy Spirit?
Oh boy.
So who
Man.
actually gave me this sermon? Was it God, or is this something that I crafted in my own strength?
My.
So there's some huge questions there.
Well, Yeah, Kent, let me interrupt real quick. I mean, this was my point when I asked you the question. I mean, we get caught up in a capitalistic mindset, it seems to me, and what's beginning to happen, it appears, is people are stepping back to try to get more of a gospel-oriented approach to this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, and I think that the gospel drives it. I think, and it's not that anyone who is charging money is bad, and even if
Sure.
they charge money still, sometimes it has to do with the way things naturally evolve and fester. Sometimes there can even be a cultural blindness. Each and every one of us, we're blind to certain things that we've been doing it for so long that you don't even think, oh, wait a second. It doesn't make sense according to our theology that we'd even charge for a sermon. And for the churches that do that, I understand why they do it. I have friends who do that and organizations that I respect who do that. But it seems like it's living an even more blessed life to be able to give it away. And I think some could argue even better stewardship or higher impact if you can give it away. And so what's happened with like Generation 2 megachurches is you start to see, well, let's start giving things away. Let's start being sure that we're loving people more than systems. And what I think will be interesting is as we start to see Generation 3 megachurches coming up, they're going to be interested in not only giving stuff away and not only trying to return to biblical principles being the heart vein that they're always returning back to the basics. At least that's my heart's prayer. But they're also going to be focused on collaboration without credit. And so I hope that there's going to be a lot more of people who they don't care if their name's on the high-end marquee. So it's more, we'll collaborate with you even if you're the one who creates that project, rather than we'll collaborate, but we want you to collaborate with us rather than. And you see that in some areas where Generation 2, by and large, is very, very close to reaching that point, but it takes a tremendous amount of not only letting ego go, but trusting in God to do things well in order to really collaborate with other ministries on that level, because you're releasing control. And it's very risky from a Western theology point of view.
Right.
But I think it's biblical. And to cycle through on some of that too, in the Bible, Jesus gave us mandates that are very simple, but are very uncomfortable to pursue, where our Western systems and theology often are things that are very complex, but very comfortable to do. And so we've replaced Christ's simplicity and uncomfortable mandates with something of, well, let's try to pursue it with something that's more, comfortable, but it's complex. So let's do bringvitations. That's more comfortable than going out and doing that one-on-one sacrificial love, long-term discipleship approach. And it doesn't mean that if you're doing bringvitations, it's bad. it's just one of those things we have to be very careful, because when our two largest churches in the U.S. are running around like 36,000 people a weekend, and then you look at like a Chinese house church network that every day they're like baptizing 36,000 or some huge number.
Yeah.
Can't go ahead.
Yes. Even once you take out spiritual climate differences and cultural differences, there's a distinct difference that we have to be aware that within Western theology, sometimes our systems are holding us back from the full impact of being the best that we could be, because we're too focused on trying to make sure there isn't any embarrassment or mistakes that are public, or that everything's done to a certain level, where the Bible's pretty messy and sloppy. So you have to really kind of look for what's that tension where you have stability and you can scale, but it's not so rigid that you're holding yourself back.
Yeah.
One of the questions out of the chat room, Kent, is what is sort of the filter or board of directors that looks at the resources that are given to you guys to make sure what makes the cut and what doesn't make the cut on OpenChurch?
That's a great question. Because our theology benchmarks are the gospel, Great Commission, and 2 love commandments, what that means is anyone involved at a core level with OpenChurch at some point is going to be uncomfortable. By and large, it's probably going to be they're uncomfortable for cultural reasons. There might be some theological reasons, but on the resource side, we're still building out the full review process for what exactly that looks like. I can't speak on the editorial side. That's more lined out. What we end up doing is it goes to the first tier editor review team, where they're looking at things to see if it's meeting those 5 categories. So is it good from a theology standpoint? So it's not saying anything, too crazy, like Christ never existed or something like that.
Sure.
It's not merging into politics in a bad way or slander. It has good enough quality, and it also isn't self-promotional. So they're looking at it like that, but then they're also classifying it in terms of theology and category, all of that. Then it moves to a second tier that's focused on grammar and spelling. They can also flag things if they want. Then it merges on to another tier that kind of helps polish up the text and format it for the web so it's easier to read, as well as adds in a little bit of search engine optimization. They can also flag things. Then it moves on to a scheduler that looks at everything that we have going on, and we're intentionally looking at content in terms of like geography, ethnicity, gender, age, denomination, theology, ministry role, ministry model, maybe even Myers-Briggs, and trying to intentionally make sure that we have a broad scope coming in. So if the scheduler sees, hey, we have 3 Pakistani worship leaders that just submitted stuff, we need to spread out those 3 articles over like 2 or 3 weeks to make sure we don't have too strong of one culture being represented. Each one of those groups has potential to flag it. And if it gets flagged, then it moves up to more of a core staff level where we can really look at things and rightfully discern if it should have been flagged or not for whatever reason. What we're doing, I have a pretty broad background of denominations and theologies that I've been a part of, that I've worked for and worked with. And our team right now is pretty diverse, but I realize that we're going to be faced with some challenges that we aren't even sure of yet. And so what we're being sure on is even though we're diverse, we don't want to assume that we know it all or that we can properly speak to everything. So we're assembling some networks of informal advisors right now who can be able to speak into things. So whether they're from like the organic house church movement, or whether they're from like staunch Reformed Calvinists, be able to have people who can speak in and give advice, not only from spiritual levels, but also from cultural perspectives, from niche industry perspective, just anything that can help us properly understand what we're interacting with. And as we end up scaling, what we'll end up doing is having different volunteers stay largely within their realm of theology. Sure. So your Methodist is sticking with Methodist, your Reformed is sticking with Reformed, and then they can judge, is this in alignment with what our preference is? Because otherwise you might have Reformed paired off with Charismatic, and they're going to be flagging it, every single time. And
well, Kent, I'm wondering, so when does it look like that the OpenChurch will launch? Have any idea at this point?
We do have some good ideas. Originally, we had wanted to launch late spring 2011, and then we started having more and more opportunities come, and more things come up that we realized that needed to be done. So we've had a much greater response and interest from resource contributors than we expected. So like by July, we were about 2 years ahead of where I expected we'd be. So I knew that we need to start creating a infrastructure that could handle that. Now we're probably like 3 to 5 years ahead of where I expected we'd be.
Wow.
Wow, yeah.
So maybe I set the benchmark too low. I'm not sure. God's definitely at work. We're at a point where I think within the next 4 weeks, we're going to have a closed alpha testing site ready, where we're just testing things through, making sure it's working well. And
now listen, if you need, like, maybe there's a show out there of technology guys that you need to help test that.
Yeah, exactly.
We could put you in touch with them. Okay.
Making note of that. So yeah, we're looking forward to actually testing it through, making sure things are working well. Fundraising has actually been very, very slow for us, but I'm grateful for it, because whenever we were talking ideas with advisors like a year ago, 8 months ago, there was such strong feedback of, it seems crazy, don't know if it's even possible, you're going to pull all of your hair out, you're going to go insane, those types of things. And they weren't really things that we worried about, just because we felt like we'll figure it out one way or another. And we're trying to be as humble as possible. But God's come along and he's kind of like helped push out any extra pride issues or faith issues. And where it would be most challenging long term is getting enthusiasm, people to actually want to collaborate with each other. We're getting that so far.
Good.
It would be difficult to get volunteers. We're getting that so far. We've had over 110 people sign up, and that was since I last checked, like a month ago.
Great.
And we're also getting buy-in from resource contributors that, from my experience and looking at historically, shouldn't be happening. So everything points to it's God. Then there's other things where we have a really gifted team of advisors. I have a lot of experience. Our other core team members have experience, and there's things where it's like, oh yeah, this should be easy. We have this covered. We know what we're doing. Our advisors have it. They know what they're doing. And then it falls flat. And there's been these reminders that if this is going to be done, it's not going to be in and of our own strength. And so it's falling flat there. And then it's on things that we actually doubt. And it's like, we're going to have to work really hard. And then we'll see if this even, it's going to take a miracle to pull off. It's actually too easy. And to where it's like, well, we didn't even have an opportunity to do it.
We have
trying to think through with some of that is the money has been more challenging to come in, but then there have been cases where like we needed to have $5,000 come in at the end of last month in order to stay on schedule, and time kept going on and on and on. We had some big donors that looked like they were going to be able to give. Then they just kept falling through, and we're like 4 days out from where it's like, okay, if we're going to start to push with this, we need to have the money in by this timeline, God. So you need to show up and do something. And we we got a huge consulting project that provided the $5,000 up front. And then right now we're working through another situation where we might have another huge consulting project that can really do some great things for OpenChurch. So it's been great because it's definitely showing that God's at work.
Yeah.
And if we get this big consulting project, money helps kind of guide when we want to do things. If we have lots of money, we'll probably actually wait until like January 15th or something to launch. That's just kind of a rough idea for a date. That way we can have our volunteer teams plugged in, learning the system. We can be building up articles, kind of streamline it pretty well. Make sure that there aren't going to be any major glitches or anything. But if we don't have that, we might actually launch sooner just because it's a bit easier for people to want to fundraise and support something if they can see what it is and see that it's actually going to get done. Because there have been projects in the past where people have said, oh yeah, we're going to do this, it's going to be incredible, it's going to be big, and it never gets done. And so I completely understand where people are coming from with that. So,
Kent, I suppose you're familiar with the Gideons, the work of the Gideons.
Yes.
And
Yes,
one of the things we always enjoyed as children was when they would come and they tell the story about the soldier whose New Testament stopped a bullet, and it changed his life and all. And I just wondered, have you been at this long enough with YouVersion that you're getting any of those kinds of stories? Not that it stopped a bullet, but that something happened where a person's life was changed and transformed? I think I killed the show.
I think you did. You switched gears so heavily there that it jumped track.
Well, our internet connection has let us down.
Hold on here, folks. We will take a momentary pause. Of course, this is one of our
This is live
guests.
broadcasting.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what happens. Our internet connection always dies in interviews like this that are great. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, we lost him for sure. I think that part of the issue here is he was in the middle of a monster truck rally.
Yeah, that's what it was.
You could hear that.
All right, we're going to try again. Oh, offline. Does that still read offline?
All right. Oh, is that us that's offline? We're not offline,
No,
are we?
I believe, are still
He's
good.
offline. I tell you what, let's...
There we go. Okay, we are back.
What just happened?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Hello again.
All right.
All
But
right.
similar things to YouVersion and so forth. Are you seeing stories come back in where people are using your products and they're using the various things that you offer and they're sharing them? This is what's happened. This is how a life was changed, or this is how our church or our ministry was radically altered. Are you finding anything like that?
Is that a question since I cut out there? Just want to be sure that were you asking that to me, and was it about OpenChurch or your
about
YouVersion?
About whatever the various categories of ministry you offer. Are you now finding that people are verifying, hey, this is really tangibly changing lives. Here's how my life was changed, or here's how our ministry was changed?
Right. Since we haven't launched OpenChurch yet, we don't have any feedback yet of, this resource has impacted us in this way. What has been really, really interesting to me, again, the enthusiasm and the buy-in that we've had from such a broad scope of Christianity, but it's we're getting feedback from groups that in some ways I never knew existed. We're having volunteers show up who are extremely talented, but they're kind of like these rogue corners of Christianity where they have these skill sets that have never really been able to be applied before.
Oh.
But our vision and our mission really resonates with them. It's something that they've wanted to be plugged in. They've kind of just been sitting, waiting for something like this to come along. That's very encouraging to me. It's in some ways it's also intimidating because I expected more thoughts like, oh, well, such and such megachurch will be involved, so and so blogger will be involved, and more just your usual, I'm a church communications guy at such and such church. I'll I'll help you out. I'm a technologist, I'm a writer. And some of the skill sets that we're getting are so unique and specialized. And the fact that they've kind of just been waiting for it, it's been a curveball, but it's also very exciting because we're having people come along that they're able to fill in pieces and accomplish things that my heart had a desire to be able to do down the road, but had no clue how we'd even pursue that.
Yeah. Right.
And so things like that are really exciting. It's been great too, as I was speaking with an organization just the other day. They have an interesting initiative coming along, and where their strengths are is something that we have a weakness we don't have built into place yet, and where their weaknesses are is something that we're going to have strengths with. And so there's tremendous collaborative potential for us to be able to come together. So right now the encouraging stories are just ones of excitement and talking through of, wait a second, we can finally collaborate. There's finally something that can accomplish this goal. Now we need to actually launch the site and execute on that. And sometimes it might take years to get to it. Sometimes it might take months, but it's really exciting.
Well, Kent, I tell you, we appreciate so much. We know you have a busy schedule. Appreciate you taking time out. I mean, this is obviously a project we're going to keep an eye on. Today in the chat room, we have a minister, a Wesleyan pastor, who actually put us on to OpenChurch. I mean, he told us about the project, and so obviously this is something that we're going to watch, and we'll be looking for its launch. And if you're willing in the future, as we get close to that launch, we'd love to have you back on and just kind of get some of your reactions and how people are reacting to OpenChurch.
Oh, certainly, I'd love to.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. Blessings on you. Where can our listeners find you on the internet?
You can find me at Twitter handle is Kent Shaffer. Facebook's Kent Shaffer. You can just Google Kent Shaffer.
That's true. It's been tested. You can do that, and it will work.
So just randomly search Kent Shaffer, and you'll find me, or like a construction builder or something else that has the same name. But just befriend them all.
All right. Well, we'll do that. And again, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us.
Oh, thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.
All right. Great project is something that we will certainly keep our eye on and be fascinating. I mean, really the ambitions here and the goals are huge,
right?
Especially as they're working across cultures and different traditions. I mean, oh my!
The position that I'm in now as a pastor and some of the things we're trying to do in our church, and looking at the cost of some of these things they're trying to give away for free, sermon graphics and videos, and you look at the cost of that, and you see that they're trying to offer that for free, and some of the guys were talking about in the chat room. For us, we're looking at a pretty substantial investment financially to do some of these things, and that's money that could be spent in other ministries.
Well, I mean, it should be said, though, too. I mean, if you go to OpenChurch and see what they have right now, I mean, they do need some financial backing.
Right.
So, I mean, it's free costs. And so, there's this tightrope. But you are beginning to see big churches like 12 Stone in our own denomination, how they are beginning to resource smaller churches at no cost. And it really is encouraging.
Yeah, it really is. It's something that I've been considering. In that, like this summer, I developed a whole series of things. I don't know about the copyright legality of what I did, because I played off of P90X, the strength training exercise thing, to go through Proverbs, and did a P31X series of stuff, and something that I would love to say, hey, if you ever would be going through a series in a month like this, here's these resources that I made. They're not fantastic. It's not
but it was good. Yeah. It was good, and the whole promotion was great. I mean, all the visuals, all the concept behind it in terms of reading the book of Proverbs, and then the sermon series that went with it. Yeah, it was awesome.
One of the things we're trying to do, and that I see as as our mission as a rural church is, there are certain, like when we're designing our logo, I wanted to have a certain rustic, rural feel to it. There's a lot of, we could do something really slick and we could do something really cutting edge. And I wanted to be cutting edge, but then we're in a rural community, and so it has to have this certain appeal. It has to have this certain texture to it. And so, like, I really would love, as part of OpenChurch, to see in churches that are very, what's the word I'm trying to think of?
I have no idea.
I don't know. That are very relevant to rural.
I was going to say something incarnational within the community.
Right.
Yeah,
because every church has to find its own unique voice within its community, and I think OpenChurch could be a great way to help them achieve that.
Well, listen, in the interest of time, we're going to skip the download of the week. We'll have that for you next week. Let's go ahead and move on to They Said It.
Let's do it.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
He could be very, very mean to people at times, whether it was to a waitress in a restaurant or to a guy who had stayed up all night coding. And you'd say, why did you do that? Why weren't you nicer? And he'd say, I really want to be with people who demand perfection. And this is who I am. Walter Isaacson, the author of the authorized biography of Steve Jobs. Source, USA Today.
By 1968, I could see the tremendous harm caused by sexual experimentation, even among my friends. I could also see their lives being torn up by family disintegration and mind-altering drugs. The wonderful world they thought they were creating was simply turning to dust, ashes, and pain. Enormous pain. Thomas Oden responding to why he revolted against modernity. Source, Christianity Today.
I'll take time for people to get used to my new name. I know people will still call me Nakusha. I want to give them happiness by saying, my new name is Kiran. Nakusha, a 16-year-old girl who, along with 284 other Indian girls, was given an official name other than Unwanted. Source, the BBC.
Shouldn't that be Karen?
Karen?
No. Instead of Nakusha, in the tagline we said Nakusha, a 16-year-old.
That's what I was thinking too.
Her name's been changed. She's given up that name, which means unwanted.
Yeah, right. So, good point.
Yeah.
Let's start with that story and just kind of give a little bit of background to what's going on. It's really cool and just kind of one of those things that just like does something to you when you read this story.
Well, it hits you in the gut. I mean, it's the country of India. Males are preferred over females, and so female babies are just abandoned. And the government officially called them Nakusha, which means unwanted.
Yes.
Well, some of them were so named by their parents.
Yeah.
You think about what that would be like every time they called your name. Unwanted.
Yeah.
And, well, I think, too, I think that this plays into just a lot of biblical narrative when we talk about receiving a new name. We Scripture actually reads it that way. And so what you see when you read this story and you hear about these girls is a living example of what Scripture's talking about when we're being adopted into the family of God and receiving those things. There it is in detail of what it looks like. And so to see the way she's valued and even the respect that brings herself. And the change that brings to just the way that she is now identifying herself. It's the same way when we're given that new name in Christ, and it's so cool. It's such a great story.
Well, and then also what hit me on this story, I think Steve is the one that at least forwarded it to me, that how Christian theology has all kinds of things to say about this in terms of that we're made in the image of God, that in that sense no one is unwanted, that they are the product of the Creator God. Also, you're going to say something?
Well, yeah, one of the reasons that they did this is the female population is declining so much because of abortion, which to do an abortion based on the sex of the child is illegal in the country. But female feticide is still a rampant problem. And I think they've kind of woken up and like, man, this is going to cause us huge problems over the next generation if we don't start changing the attitudes about females in our society. And it's just a heartwarming story for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we have a guest.
Yeah.
Tony, your doorbell
The doorbell's
just rang.
ringing
This is like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's a beautiful day.
What's the name of the postman that comes in? What's the song that
Yeah.
he sings on that show?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, come on. I can picture the guy.
The only
in
thing
my
I
head.
think of is trolley. That's the only thing I think of, the trolley who comes spinning in. Hey, this article,
McFeely. Hey,
Mr. McFeely.
there we go.
Leave it to Matthew.
No, Steven got it.
Oh,
there.
You want me to go get the doorbell?
Did it ring again?
Yes, it did. How about if I go do that? Might be the Lord.
Yeah, it might.
He was supposed to come Friday.
Yeah. It might not be the Lord. I tell you, another great read in our They Said It is the article in Christianity Today. Now, this is by Thomas Oden. This is a reprint of a 1990 article. But, man, is this great reading. And also, there are so many things I would commend about this article. One is his reading of the church fathers, but also when he gets to the point of abortion. And you have to keep in mind with Oden was very liberal in his leanings. He really bought into modernity and a lot that goes along with that. And he became disillusioned, and it's amazing how the abortion issue becomes one of those linchpin items for him, because he said what I began to see is that we were using the whole argument of a person's individual right, he said, really to snuff out life, and what he was seeing in his own world was it became a matter of convenience for women, not a necessity as they were arguing. Yeah, that whole article is just a great read.
Right.
All right. I guess we're done with that.
Well, the Steve Jobs book is already setting records. It's probably going to be Amazon's best-selling book of the year, what they're saying.
Did anyone see the 60 Minutes interview?
Yes, it's actually online.
Isaacson?
You can watch it on YouTube. But yeah, pretty interesting interview. What I like about, what I'm happy about with the book is that it is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And my understanding is from people that I've heard that have read it is that it is true to that, which is abnormal for Steve Jobs and such a protected and private about how he presents himself, but. How cool to have that.
Two people that have read the book have said that the book was very discouraging.
I wouldn't, well,
yeah.
I mean, just that quote I read, that's the thing about geniuses and artists is there's this edge to them that they don't,
I know, and people don't understand.
But, people,
you knew that was coming.
they have problems interrelating with people, but because they're so driven, it makes you wonder what would the world be like if Steve Jobs had been more nicer but less driven.
Or what would it be if Adolf Hitler was a systems manager?
Oh my word! Steve Jobs and Adolf Hitler. Way to go there, Steve.
There you go.
Alienate our whole base.
Well, I was just trying to expose his theory to its most extreme.
Well, the two people that said that they have found the book discouraging just talk about, one of the guys said he just was a mean man. He just was a mean man.
Right.
And so all the praise that we've seen is obviously attached to his products because we see this wonderful end result. But the biography seems to suggest that there's a trail of carnage leading to these wonderful products.
Right.
Which, it just raises these great questions, and for us as believers, do the ends justify the means?
Well, I mean, doesn't the same apply to the church? That what good is it for a church to grow if the pastor had to be? I mean, it's one thing to be a visionary and to be a leader and to be focused in what God's called you to do. But if you have to walk over people,
well, this is what Kent
people,
raised. He said we got a lot of great things from the corporate world. He said great systems, but we kind of backed off on loving people. And what does that look like?
Right,
doing it in love. So. Yeah, you have to give Steve Jobs credit that he authorized this biography, and he said from the beginning, "I will not." He said he told Isaacson, "I'm not even going to read it." So you just do it, and gave him access. Isaacson said that he interviewed over 100 people. For this book,
and
it was a lot.
I guess that's one of the privileges. I mean, as gruesome as this sounds, but knowing that you're going to die. And that you have some time gives you the ability to set things up like this that, I mean, a guy like Steve Jobs would do. All right, I'm going to die. It's going to happen. And I kind of have a timeline on that. So let's make this biography happen.
One of the things that comes out of the book, I understand, is that what makes iTunes finally really successful was when it came out on a Windows platform.
Yeah, well, the iPod and everything.
Yeah,
it was Mac only and FireWire, and no, you couldn't use it. And so a great product. And apparently, from where the book reads, he fought that. He
fought it to the end, and then in a meeting,
months, but finally, they.
In a meeting, he uses all kinds of expletives, and finally says, "Well, y'all do what you want to do on it." But it leads to the success, and so
of other products too. So not just that, but that opens
kind of like
the door.
Our pre-show, then, isn't it?
That opens the door for people to get that taste in their mouth of what an Apple product is like. Yeah. I mean, I saw an iPod and handled an iPod long before I ever held a MacBook, and saw, wow, this is made by a computer company. It's a really nice little device. Then later on.
Well, my point is this: that Jobs is given credit for revolutionizing the music market. But had he not had people that were also speaking into his life, it would not have happened.
Right. Well, and that I think that speaks to us and the way that we need to surround ourselves with other people that can speak into our lives well, right? So I would love to. I know we're really running late on time and we don't have much left, but there is an interesting conversation going on in the chat room that would have made a wonderful They Said It. That I wonder if we can add into. Post-amendum, what is the term?
I don't know.
Into our They Said It. Anyways, it's about Mars Hill Church and the logo dispute that was between them and a church in Sacramento. So here's the They Said It from that. In hindsight, we realize now that the way we went about raising our concerns, while acceptable in the business world, is not the way we should deal with our fellow Christians. And that's coming from Mars Hill, Seattle, Mark Driscoll's church, who filed a cease and desist letter with Mars Hill, Sacramento, a church that was planted 10 years after Mars Hill, Seattle was planted, that was using their, or at least a very similar logo, which their logo is like the circle with a serifed M in it that they ripped off. And I just like that. While acceptable in the business world, perhaps this is the way we should have handled it as a church.
This blew up over the weekend. I mean, the Twittersphere.
It's always good when the church goes to court with another church.
Well, and it was blowing up, and people were throwing Driscoll under the bus, and Driscoll takes full responsibility here. He says, man, we were wrong, our bad. And it's also good from the pastor from Mars Hill, Sacramento, that they're both like, hey, everything's good. There's no... And as I'm looking at this article on ChristianPost.com, an ad for Indiana Wesleyan University.
Here you go.
Anyway,
I got Joel Osteen. I'm looking at the same article. I got Joel.
Oh my! Whoa! You talk about?
He's got
Hold
the
on.
Christian Mac.
You talk about going over. I mean, now we're just going to have it come off the rails.
Yeah.
You forwarded me that article by Joel Osteen saying that
Mormonism is Christian.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. No, I just got it this morning. So. Thank you, Steve, for enlightening us.
I mean, it's a video of him saying it. You don't have to take our word for it.
Well, I guess he's ready to run for president.
Yep.
Whatever.
Or something.
He smiles too much for president.
Oh, my goodness.
There's also Liberty University on my page. So.
All right. Hey, listen, quick, our last story. The end of the world comes again.
Yeah,
it's the end.
I'm getting tired of this. I'm getting passed by every. I'm going to take it personal if it happens again.
Harold Camping.
He's retired. He has stepped away from the ministry. He has said he is physically unable to continue doing the radio show, and he's 90 years old. And he's also said...
It's because guys like you ridicule him. Way to go.
Listen...
If God can't get it right, it's what he said.
Well, my old college roommate said if somebody did happen to guess the right date, God would change it.
Yeah, I firmly believe that.
But he also said, you know, he's been basing the last, 40 years of his ministry on the fact that he's been able to interpret and figure out the date, and now he said, he can't figure out the date.
There you go. All right. So those of you that, it's crazy because there was no build up to this second time. Yeah, this is the way it works. If you get it wrong the first time,
that day there was build up. I was thinking about the media attention to it. There was that's something that just aggravates me. Like having to see all that
forgot about
again.
it until the day of, and then you saw a little bit of media. But remember the last time we had all this build up. And see if you get it wrong the first time, I'd say
there were
give
people
you as
that
much
quit
press.
their jobs and they were traveling the country, and they put a sign on the side of their truck. And
well, when we do episode 200, that's when Heath's going to release the date, and so I mean we're crunching numbers. And,
that's right.
I hate to tell you this, but he's coming between 199 and 200. So I don't know how Heath can be doing that.
All right,
you heard it here.
Yeah.
There's the official prediction. Mark your calendars. You can crunch the numbers and figure out when we'll be at episode 199.
Yeah. All right, real quick here, things coming up. November the 9th, we have Donna Witten. She's the Director of Communications at 12 Stone Church. She also wrote a child's book, Pocket Full of Questions, and 12 Stone did a 2-week sermon series on that. It'll be great talking to her about that whole experience.
Will, can I interject here and say Communications, what a great staff job that churches should have. If I could have that. Like, there is Kim Meyer, who wrote a book. Oh, my word. Her thing.
Less clutter, less noise.
Yes.
Great
She's the for Granger Community Church. Fantastic book, and something that, yes, we need these kind of people in the church big time. So I'm looking forward to this one.
I'm going to say, we got her on the show. November 16th, Dr. Bob Weitzel will be discussing his new book, Organics. That is coming out, Organics, how about that? That's coming out on November the 11th. We're his first interview after the book is released. On November the 23rd, we have Dr. Mark Gorvette. He's the president of Bethany Bible College. Also, what he wants to do is to set up an interview with his staff there, because they have they may have an announcement for us.
I've heard. I can't say.
Public. That's not public.
Biting my tongue.
I got an email from him, and so he wants his staff there. So we.
Breaking news.
Breaking news on the Technology Show, November the 23rd. That's all I can say.
Heard it here first.
That's all I can say. November the 7th, we have Dr. Joanne Lyon here. She's General Superintendent for the Wesleyan Church. We had her about a year ago, so really looking forward to that.
And we're expecting breaking news on that day as well.
Only Heath says that. December the 14th, in studio, Dr. Todd Voss. He's the new president at Southern Wesleyan University. Great guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, comes with just wonderful energy and real vision, and it's going to be fun having him in studio. And then January the 4th, a guy some of you might have heard of. His name is Mark Batterson. Understand he's going to release a book. And,
hey, Heath wore his microphone one time.
Whoa.
Right.
Heath's lips were millimeters away from where. Have you thought about this? From where?
My word.
All right, this program's just
Mark
gone.
PG. It was one of those. It was one of those over the ear.
That is
things
so
that comes
pathetic.
That was.
I know you handed.
He's going to get the interview canceled, man.
I actually have a picture of Heath with that microphone.
Yeah,
on.
put it. I was like, man, this microphone's annoying.
Oh my word! All right, hey, Heath, where can our listeners find you on the internet, and maybe a picture of you with Batterson's microphone?
Well, they could actually, if they go to heathmelican.com, there's a lot of videos there, and I blog there. I need to update some great stuff going on in my life and my church that I'm about to start posting about, so it's good.
All right, Steve.
Facebook.com.
All right,
that's
man.
it. Steve Stanley, the one,
you
the
are
only.
Awesome.
Yep, possum.
MatthewTG.com for MatthewTG.
All right, you can find me at Facebook.com/AKC64. 64 was a very good year, by the way. Mary Poppins came out in 64. Does anyone care? Probably not. All right. Listen, if you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechnologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, send your emails to thetechnologyshow@gmail.com, or better yet, leave us a voicemail by calling us at 3049-THEOLOGY. That's 304-986-5649.
You'd make my day.
You would make Matthew TG's day. All right, as always, we appreciate people in the chat room. Those of you that download the podcast later, thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Sorry for throwing you under the bus like that, Heath.
It's all right.
I'll never talk about your lips again.